The coldest power move you can make is not revenge. It's not screaming in someone's face. It's not proving a point. It's silence. Silence is surgical. You walk away. You don't explain. You don't give the final chapter. You leave the story unfinished, and you let the other person live inside that unfinished story. That is psychological leverage. Here's the part most people never understand. People aren't truly addicted to love, attention, praise, or even comfort. People are addicted to certainty. To answers. To, why did this happen? The human mind craves closure the way the body craves air. When something ends, the mind needs to put it in a box. Okay, that's over. I know what happened. I understand my role. I know what they felt. I know why it ended. That gives a person stability. That gives them sleep. Take that away, and you don't just hurt their feelings. You take control of their thinking. If you leave someone without clarity, without a reason, without the truth, without that final conversation, you lock them into a mental loop. And that loop is you. That's the law. If you give closure, you release them. If you don't, you own them. Think about it this way. You end something and you pour your heart out. You tell them exactly how you feel. You tell them what they did wrong, what you didn't like, what you're done with. You send the long message, you make the call, you say everything. What happens a week later? They're sad, sure. They're irritated, maybe. But then they calm down. They process it. They accept it. They move on. They sleep. Now compare that to this. You leave without a speech. You go quiet. You give no warning. No, we need to talk. No explanation. No, it's not you, it's me. You just remove your presence and vanish from their world. Now what happens a week later? They're still awake at 3 a.m. running simulations. What happened? Are they mad? Did I say something? Did I do something wrong? Are they coming back? Are they testing me? Are they done? Are they just busy? Notice the difference. In version 1, they're sad, but they're free. In version 2, they're anxious, and they're not free. That's leverage. This is what people don't like to admit. Closure is a gift. Closure is mercy. Closure is, here, I'll help you heal from me. Why should you hand that out to people who lied to you, disrespected you, betrayed you, played with you, underestimated you? Why would you give your enemy peace? When you refuse to give that final answer, you create permanent tension in their mind. You become the open tab in their brain that never closes. The story never ends, so their mind keeps coming back to it over and over and over. And here's the brutal part. And you've seen this in real life. The story they play in their head becomes worse than anything you ever would have said in reality. Because when you don't explain yourself, they start inventing explanations. When you don't reveal your thinking, they start writing theories. When you don't show them your next move, they start imagining 20 different outcomes. They don't know what page you're on, so they start rewriting the entire book. And every version they imagine still has you in it. That's why silence is so powerful. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to argue. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to convince anybody of anything. You don't have to prove your side. You just stop feeding them information, and their own mind does everything for you. They stay spinning. You stay clean. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He warned over and over, don't make yourself fully readable. Don't become transparent. Don't let people comfortably decode you. The more you explain, the more power you hand away. The less you explain, the more they're forced to live in uncertainty. And uncertainty is a kind of cage. People always act like they want honesty. You've heard this. Just be honest with me. Just tell me what happened so I can move on. No. Listen to what they're really saying underneath that. What they're saying is, please free me. I can't stop thinking about you. Please cut this chain so I can breathe. Closure is the key that unlocks their cage. If you give it to them, they walk out. They heal. They recover. They stop replaying you. You disappear from their mental world. But if you don't give it, they don't walk out. They stay in the cage. They stay in the loop. They keep coming back to you. Not because they want you, but because their mind won't let the storyline end without an answer. That's psychological leverage. Let's make it real. Scenario 1. Romance. You end things with someone. Option A. You send a long emotional message explaining why you can't keep doing this. You tell them you care, but it's unhealthy, it's painful, it's not sustainable. You've basically given them a clean ending. That person cries, journals, vents to their friends, and in a few months they're actually okay. Option B. You disappear. No argument, no speech, no one last call. You just stop existing in their life. You leave nothing but silence. Do you understand what you just did? You created an echo chamber where they are now haunted by their own questions. Was I not enough? Did they use me? Are they coming back? Did I make them mad? Are they talking to someone else? They don't move on in 3 months. Sometimes they don't move on in 3 years. You are now permanently wired into how they trust, how they date, how they attach, how they protect themselves. You're in the blueprint now. Let's do scenario 2. Enemies. Someone disrespects you. You blow up on them. You unload every reason you're done with them. You insult them. You drag them. You tell them exactly what they did and how you're going to cut them off. You know what they walk away with? A clean narrative. Yeah, we fought. Yeah, they're mad at me. Whatever, I don't care. Now watch what happens if instead you just cut them off without a sound. No reaction, no scene, no explanation. You just vanish from their circle. Now they're not comfortable. Now they're uneasy. Now they're replaying. What are they planning? Are they waiting? Are they going to expose me later? Are they talking about me? Do they hate me? Do they not care about me at all? Your silence becomes pressure. Your silence becomes paranoia. Your silence becomes presence. Scenario 3. Work. Coworker crosses you. You sit them down. You politely explain your issue. You make your position known. They nod. They get it. Tension cleared. Or you stop telling them anything. You keep them outside the loop. You keep them guessing where you stand. You are polite, but unreadable. Now they're off balance. Now they're nervous. Now they're second-guessing every move around you. That anxiety is control. Here's the pattern. Anger fades. Threats fade. Even pain fades. But uncertainty does not fade. Uncertainty lingers. It festers. It reopens itself. When there's no closure, the wound can't scar. It stays fresh. It keeps bleeding every time they think of you. That's why no closure is not just emotional. It's strategic. It's positional. It keeps you in their head even when you're not in the room. When you deny someone closure, you deny them peace. And a person without peace will think about you long after you've forgotten them. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said mercy weakens power. Closure is mercy. Closure frees them. It gives them the clarity to rebuild. When you take it away, they stay tied to you, even if they hate you for it. If you want control, don't give people the ending they crave. If you want psychological leverage, don't give them the answers that set them free. Your silence, your absence, your mystery, those are your most potent weapons. Not because they destroy people directly, but because they let people destroy themselves trying to understand you. Think about it. When someone can't make sense of what happened, their own mind turns against them. They question their worth. They replay every memory. They rewrite the story 100 times. And while they're trapped in that endless analysis, you're gone. Calm, detached, already on to the next chapter. That's the beauty of this law. You don't fight. You don't manipulate directly. You just leave a void, and their mind rushes to fill it. They become their own prison guard. A clean ending sets people free. An unfinished one traps them forever. Here's the deeper truth. Most people don't actually want happiness. They want answers. They want to know why something happened. They want to know where they stand. They want to know how the story ends. That's what gives them security. But life, and especially power, is built on the opposite. It's built on uncertainty, on ambiguity, on never letting anyone feel like they fully get you. Machiavelli himself wrote in a way that followed this principle. His ideas never concluded neatly. They invited endless interpretation. That's why, centuries later, we still debate what he truly meant. Because his writings never gave us closure. They never said, "This is the final truth." They left gaps, and the world has been filling them in ever since. The same principle applies to how you handle people. Never give them the final page. Let's look at it in everyday life. You have a heated argument with someone. You pour out every emotion, explain yourself completely, shout, cry, slam the door, and walk away. A week later, that person sleeps fine. They know where things stand. They know it's over. They got their closure. But if you walk away quietly, no speech, no text, no explanation, that same person will not sleep soundly again. They'll be haunted by what you didn't say. They'll keep trying to decode your silence. They'll keep wondering if you're angry, if you're hurt, if you'll ever come back. They'll replay every interaction in their head, trying to find the moment it all went wrong. That's the hold silence has. The unfinished always has more power than the finished, because the mind can't leave a puzzle unsolved. When you leave someone guessing, they start doing the emotional labor for you. They start writing the story you never had to tell. If you don't explain yourself, they invent explanations. If you don't reveal your motives, they imagine them. If you don't tell them what you want, they start building theories. Each theory keeps you alive in their head. That's how silence becomes control. And the most fascinating part, while they're busy spinning theories, you move freely. You've already detached. You've already stepped into a new state of power. You no longer react to them, they react to your absence. Now look at the people who beg for closure after a breakup or betrayal. They say things like, "Just tell me the truth. Just be honest with me. I just need to understand." But what they're really saying is, "Please free me. Please release me from your control." They believe knowing the truth will bring peace, but closure rarely brings peace. It brings logic, and logic kills emotion. If you give them the truth, you help them heal. If you stay silent, they never heal, and that means your presence stays alive. So ask yourself, why would you hand someone the key to escape your influence? Every explanation you give is a rope you throw down into their confusion, and with enough explanation, they climb out and walk away. Machiavelli would tell you to stop doing that. He'd say, never over-explain. Speak less than you know. Reveal less than you think. Leave gaps in your story, because the mind can't handle gaps. It will fill them in with imagination, and imagination is always harsher than reality. That's how silence turns their own mind into your weapon. Here's how this looks in the real world. The lover. You end things with a long, honest message. You tell them why. You tell them you still care, but it's time to part ways. They cry, process it, and move on. Or you vanish. No explanation, no closure, no goodbye. They never stop thinking of you. They wonder if you'll return, what they did wrong, whether you ever loved them. They bring your ghost into every relationship that follows. The enemy. You fight back, explaining every reason you cut them off. They get angry, but at least they understand. Now they can hate you clearly, and that clarity gives them power back. Or you walk away without a word. Now they can't hate you comfortably. They don't know what you're planning. They can't predict your next move, and that unpredictability is fear. The colleague. You calmly explain your disagreement. They nod. They accept it. The tension is gone. Or you stay silent, distant, unreadable. They spend days replaying what they did wrong, overanalyzing every word you said. Their uncertainty becomes your control. See the pattern? Fear fades. Anger fades. Pain fades. But uncertainty? That stays forever. A threat loses power once it's spoken. But silence keeps them guessing forever. That's why Machiavelli would say closure is not kindness. Closure is weakness. When you give someone closure, you give them peace. And when you give them peace, you lose influence. When you deny closure, you don't destroy people. You make them destroy themselves trying to understand you. The absence of closure keeps the wound open. It doesn't heal. It doesn't close. It reopens every time they remember. And because they can't close it, they can't stop thinking of you. That's the law. If you want to master psychological leverage, stop giving people endings. Let them circle around the silence you left behind. Let them build myths about you. Let them fill in the blanks. Because every time they try to make sense of you, they hand you their attention. You don't even have to lift a finger. You've already won. Here's the key. When you walk away without closure, you create imbalance. You're done. They're not. You've processed everything. They're still processing you. That imbalance is the root of psychological power. You leave the story closed on your end, but open on theirs. You become the finished chapter in your own life and the unfinished chapter in theirs. Think about it. They say they've moved on, but they're performing. They act like they're over you laughing, posting, pretending, but the truth is their subconscious is still spinning. You're still in the background of every thought. The story never ended. That's what makes the dynamic asymmetrical. You're silent. They're loud. You've let go. They're still clinging to the invisible thread. You've stopped talking. They're having full conversations in their head about what they wish they'd said to you. That imbalance is advantage. And Machiavelli would never call it cruelty. He'd call it positioning. Because power is not about controlling people's actions. It's about controlling the rhythm of the interaction. You control the rhythm when others are reacting to your silence instead of your words. One of the most fascinating modern forms of this principle is what people now call ghosting. Most think ghosting is emotional immaturity, a lack of communication, cowardice, avoidance. But when used deliberately, it becomes a weapon. It becomes what Machiavelli would recognize as psychological disorientation. Here's how you use it consciously. Step 1. Give them an emotional high. Before you disappear, build an intense connection. Mirror their emotions. Reflect their needs. Make them feel seen, understood, and secure. Then, right when they feel closest to you, withdraw. That's contrast. And contrast creates obsession. People don't remember balance. They remember the highs and the drops. Step 2. Leave at the peak. Most people end things after conflict or decline. You leave when things are good, when they're in love, inspired, impressed. That sudden disappearance violates the natural rhythm of the story, and the human brain hates broken patterns. Now, they're addicted to the story that never finished. Step 3. Say nothing. Don't send a goodbye. Don't send an "I need space." Don't leave a note explaining your reasons. Silence breeds projection. The less you say, the more their imagination takes over, and imagination multiplies emotion. Step 4, optional. Reappear subtly. Maybe a like on a post, a short message, a vague emoji, nothing direct. Just enough to stir the ashes and let them build the fire again themselves. Now you've reset the loop. They're right back to the beginning, chasing closure that will never come. You are no longer the hero or the villain. You've become the unresolved character, and unresolved characters live the longest in the human psyche. Here's the twist. People who never got closure don't just suffer. They often come back, not to fix things, not to reconcile, not even to love you again. They come back because their mind demands resolution. Their brain whispers, "You need to end this properly." But there is no proper ending. That's the design. When they return, they come back weaker. They're no longer negotiating from strength. They're negotiating from confusion. They've spent weeks, months, or even years trying to make sense of you. And while they've been analyzing, you've been detaching. That's the real leverage. They've been thinking about you. You haven't been thinking about them. The gap between those two realities is power. This is Machiavellian strategy in pure form, not cruelty for cruelty's sake, but control through detachment. You don't control people by holding their hand. You control them by holding the narrative. When you leave someone without closure, you control the tempo of their emotions. You insert yourself into their decision-making process. They start filtering new relationships, new choices, even new ambitions through the lens of you. You never asked for loyalty, but they keep giving it. You never demanded attention, but they keep focusing on you. You never justified your silence, but they keep writing reasons for it. That's the beauty of cold psychological leverage. It doesn't require domination. It requires distance. This is not emotional recklessness. It's cold strategy. It's knowing when to stop explaining. It's knowing that clarity kills fascination. When you don't give closure, you don't have to control people directly. You simply become the mystery they orbit. Think of it this way. Power isn't always about who speaks loudest. Sometimes it's about who stays silent the longest. When you give people closure, they leave with peace. When you deny it, they leave with obsession. And obsession, whether it's love, hate, or confusion, is still attention. It's still energy. And energy is leverage. The mind can't rest without resolution. It can't move on without an ending. So when you refuse to give it one, you become the loop they can't escape. That's how silence turns into control. That's how absence becomes dominance. You don't need to chase people. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend your choices. You just need to master the art of leaving things unsaid. Because when the mind can't finish the story, it replays it forever. And every replay is power that belongs to you. So the next time you're tempted to explain yourself, stop. The next time you feel the urge to say, "just so they understand," don't. Understanding frees them. Mystery binds them. Machiavelli's law of psychological leverage is simple. Never give people the ending they want. Never finish the sentence. Let the silence do the talking. Because when they can't close the story, you remain the story. When you withhold closure, you do more than create obsession, you create status. Because in silence, people start building myths. When they can't get answers from you, they look for them elsewhere, and the first place they go is other people. They ask friends, co-workers, anyone who might have insight. Have you heard from them? Why do you think they left like that? What do you think they meant by that message? And every time your name passes through someone's mouth, you grow. Not because you're present, but because you're unresolved. The mystery becomes your reputation. You don't demand attention, they give it to you. You don't explain yourself, they do it for you. You don't defend your image, they build it. That's the Machiavellian genius, controlling the room without saying a word. You become a story, a topic, a rumor. Your silence becomes social gravity. People orbit it, guessing, arguing, analyzing. And every speculation adds to your legend. They're not gossiping, they're doing your PR. Now you're not a person anymore. You're an image. And images are harder to kill than people. What's rare becomes valuable. What's inaccessible becomes desirable. What disappears without explanation becomes unforgettable. This is why removing yourself without closure doesn't make you weak. It makes you scarce. And scarcity is power. People begin to say, "He doesn't talk to anyone anymore. She just vanished one day." They never explain themselves. And suddenly, that mystery becomes respect. Even if they dislike you, they can't help but admire your control. Because the ability to walk away without explaining is rare, and rarity commands attention. People wonder, what do they know that I don't? How can they be so calm, so detached? Why do they never need to justify themselves like everyone else? That curiosity is submission disguised as admiration. They don't realize it, but their confusion is already obedience. Because when someone craves answers from you, they're already positioned beneath you. They're reacting. You're not. They're chasing understanding. You're creating it. That's emotional hierarchy. The moment people need your explanation to feel complete, they've given you control over their peace. You decide when or if they ever get it back. And here's the paradox. Machiavelli would appreciate most. The more someone feels confused by you, the more likely they are to defend you publicly. Why? Ego. If they admit they never got closure, they'd have to admit weakness. They'd have to admit they weren't important enough for you to explain yourself. So, to protect their pride, they rewrite the story. They say, "No, they're just mysterious." They operate differently. They think on a deeper level. They have to make sense of your silence, so they glorify it. They preserve your reputation to preserve their dignity. They rationalize your absence by painting you as strategic, enlightened, above the crowd. That's free propaganda. Machiavelli would call this earned perception influence that doesn't need defense. You didn't argue for your value. They argued it for you. This is the kind of power that can't be forced. It's felt. It's cultivated through contrast, being visible enough to be remembered, but distant enough to be unreachable. Present, but distant. Remembered, but untouchable. Admired, but never fully understood. That is the emotional mirage of power. It makes people chase you forever, not because they love you, but because they can't finish you. And that chase becomes their cage. They can't stop checking your page, your messages, your silence. They study your absence the way others study words. And every time they do, they reinforce your presence. That's how confusion turns into loyalty. That's how obsession becomes worship. Years later, they'll still check for signs of you. They'll reread your old messages, rewatch your words, analyze your silences. They'll explain you to others. They'll keep your myth alive just to soothe the ache of not knowing. At that point, you don't even have to exist in their life anymore. They'll carry you like a phantom in their mind, a reference point for everything that came after. That's the ultimate form of leverage. Turning your silence into something sacred. But here's the catch once you've built that aura. You can never break it with an explanation. Never return just to clarify. Never set the record straight. Never tell your side of the story. Because the moment you do, you kill the legend. You collapse the myth into reality. And reality is never as powerful as mystery. If you return without answers. If you speak without explanation. If they ask, just smile and say, some things don't need to be said. Maintain the silhouette. Never step fully into the light again, because the power was never in what happened, but in what was left unsaid. Closure burns everything down. Mystery keeps it alive. And remember this, the stronger someone is, the more your silence breaks them. Because strong people thrive on understanding. They dominate through logic. They're used to control. When you vanish without explanation, you challenge their identity. They can't categorize you. They can't control the narrative. And that loss of control eats at them. They'll start overanalyzing, reaching out, replaying every interaction, all because you refuse to give them the comfort of knowing. Now the powerful person becomes weak. Now the confident one becomes anxious. Now the loud one talks about you in circles. And you? You say nothing. Because that's the law. Never give them closure. Let their mind do the work. Let their ego do the chasing. Let their silence become the sound of your dominance. Power is not about how loud your presence is. It's about how deeply your absence echoes. When you master the art of withholding closure, you step into a rare kind of power, one that doesn't depend on force, words, or appearances. It's the power of becoming unforgettable through silence. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that people can resist confrontation, they can recover from pain, and they can adapt to loss, but they cannot tolerate uncertainty. Because uncertainty forces the mind to loop endlessly. It traps the imagination inside unfinished business. You see, the mind cannot live with a gap. It needs to complete every story, answer every question, and label every experience. But when you take that away, when you refuse to give people the final sentence, you turn their own psychology into a cage. They'll start to fill in the blanks themselves. They'll write you into every quiet moment. They'll dream about your reasons, your motives, your silence. They'll try to solve you like a puzzle that keeps changing shape. And that's how you stay in control, because they're still reacting to a version of you that no longer exists. They think they're chasing truth, but they're chasing ghosts. You left, you moved on, you're free, but they're still stuck in a story that never found its ending. That's the essence of Machiavelli's law of psychological leverage. To control others not through violence or manipulation, but through absence. To make your silence louder than your speech. To let your mystery become their obsession. It's not cruelty, it's strategy. Because in the world of power, clarity is currency. The one who controls the narrative controls reality. And when you refuse to give someone a clear ending, you seize control of the narrative. They can't define you. They can't defend themselves against you. They can't forget you. Every future decision they make carries the shadow of your silence. Every person they meet is compared to the memory of you. And every time they think they've escaped, one unanswered question drags them back. That's not coincidence. That's design. Now imagine this in every domain of life: romantic, social, professional, political. The rival who never hears your strategy begins to imagine it everywhere. The competitor who never learns your next move starts fighting ghosts. The colleague you let go without an explanation spends months trying to fix what can't be fixed. The friend you leave behind without drama keeps wondering if they did something wrong. Each of them remains entangled in your absence. Each of them becomes an echo chamber of your influence. And you move forward, untouched. You see, the person who demands closure is really begging for peace. They're asking you to untie the knot you created in their mind. They're saying, "Please, set me free from your silence." But the moment you give them that peace, you lose power. Because closure is mercy, and mercy destroys leverage. This is why Machiavelli would tell you, if you must disappear, do it cleanly. No warnings, no long explanations, no emotional justifications. Leave the space empty and let them wrestle with the weight of your quiet. Most people leave too loudly. They write long messages, post emotional quotes, justify themselves to the world. And in doing so, they erase their own mystique. They make themselves understandable, and what's understood can be forgotten. But when you leave without a word, you become a question, and questions live forever. That's the secret of myth. Myths aren't remembered because they were explained. They're remembered because they were never fully solved. When someone says, "I don't understand why they left," what they really mean is, "I can't stop thinking about them." When they say, "I just want closure," what they're admitting is, they still control my peace. That's why silence, used consciously, becomes sacred. It's the difference between being remembered accurately and being remembered powerfully. Accurate memories fade. Powerful ones become legend. When you vanish cleanly, when you withdraw in the middle of connection, when you disappear while they still care, you leave them suspended between clarity and confusion. And that state is addictive. It's not love. It's not hate. It's fixation. They'll replay every detail, dissect every look, analyze every pause, trying to extract meaning where there is none. They'll construct entire fantasies of what could have been, what might still be, what you meant. They'll fall in love with possibilities, not with reality. And the more they imagine, the more power you hold. Because obsession is just loyalty in disguise. Even if it's negative, even if it's angry, it still belongs to you. That's why Machiavelli's strategy is not about destruction. It's about permanence. You don't want to win a single argument. You want to occupy permanent space in their psyche. When you withhold closure, you don't give them the tools to erase you. You become the scar that never heals, the reference point they use to measure every experience after you. It's not about ego. It's about equilibrium. You end things on your time, with your calm, and you walk away finished. They're left open, and that imbalance tilts the psychological field in your favor. They chase resolution. You embody detachment. They crave your words. You guard your silence. They seek to define you. You refuse to be defined. And the more they reach, the further you seem. Until one day, your absence becomes divine, something beyond logic, beyond human error, beyond explanation. That's how psychological leverage evolves into myth. You start as a person. You end as a story. Everywhere they go, your absence shapes how they behave. They tell others, "No one ever made me feel that way. I don't know why, but I still think about them. They were different." Those aren't compliments. Those are symptoms of control. Because once someone starts defending your impact without your presence, they're no longer thinking freely. They're thinking through the framework you left behind. You engineered the emotional architecture, and they still live inside it. And that's the quiet triumph of Machiavellian strategy. Winning without confrontation, controlling without contact, commanding attention through absence. You don't need to shout to be remembered. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need to explain to be understood. You simply need to master restraint, to know when to stop giving answers, when to let silence do what words cannot. Because every time you explain yourself, you trade mystery for comprehension. And comprehension is the death of fascination. When people understand you, they stop wondering about you. When they stop wondering, they stop caring. And when they stop caring, you become forgettable. Never let yourself be forgettable. The art of power is not about being loved or feared. It's about being unforgettable. And the only way to be unforgettable is to leave people unfinished. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them fill the silence with their own imagination. Because while they're still talking, you're still winning. While they're still guessing, you're still relevant. And while they're still craving closure, you're still in control. That's the end game of Machiavelli's law of psychological leverage. You never hurt people by striking them. You hurt them by refusing to finish the sentence. You don't dominate them with presence. You dominate them with absence. You don't trap them in chains. You trap them in thoughts. And the cruel brilliance of it all? They'll think it's their fault. They'll think they're the ones who can't let go. They'll think they chose to keep replaying you. But you'll know the truth. You wrote the perfect unfinished story and left them to live inside it. That's how you rise above the noise. That's how you become myth instead of memory. That's how silence becomes your sharpest weapon. So remember, if you want to be free, seek closure. But if you want to be remembered, deny it. Leave people wondering. Leave them circling. Leave them talking long after you've stopped listening. Because the most powerful sentence you'll ever write is the one you never finish. And this is where Machiavelli's genius burns brightest, in the art of turning absence into authority. Because true power is not in domination, not in confrontation, not in explanation. It's in leaving something unfinished. It's in walking away so cleanly, so silently, that your name becomes a question no one can answer. When you deny closure, you deny peace. And the mind cannot live without peace. It must keep searching, replaying, rewriting. It must build stories to make sense of what it cannot understand. In doing so, it builds you a monument inside its own confusion. That's the secret. You don't chase power. You let others hand it to you through their obsession. Every time they mention your name, every time they wonder what you meant, every time they try to explain your silence to someone else, they feed your myth. Because closure ends the story, but mystery multiplies it. The world remembers mysteries, not explanations. People forget what they understand, but they never forget what they can't. Every unanswered question becomes an echo. Every unfinished story becomes legend. When you walk away at the height of someone's curiosity, you freeze their perception of you at its most powerful point. You stop time in their mind. You turn into the what-if that never fades. That's why those who leave without a word are remembered longer than those who said too much. You see, most people want to be loved or feared. Machiavelli would say, be remembered. Love dies with comfort. Fear fades with distance. But mystery survives both. That's why you must learn to be present, but distant, visible yet unreachable, known but never fully known. Because the moment people fully understand you, they move on. But when they can't, they orbit you forever. You don't need to argue to prove your worth. You don't need to scream to show your strength. You just need to leave behind a silence so deep it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. That's how power evolves from attention to influence, from presence to permanence. So remember this final law. Never give them the ending they crave. Let them carry your absence like a secret they can't put down. Let your silence do the talking long after you're gone. Because in the end, the most unforgettable people are not those who stayed, but those who left without saying goodbye. Never give them closure. Give them forever.